On the 20th of November, Deep Green Resistance is hosting The Girls and the Grasses, an online live event on ecofeminism, featuring Heide Guttner-Abendroth, a pioneer researcher in modern matriarchal studies. It also includes a panel discussion, voices of women across the world sharing their experiences in defending the land they love, a take from male allies on the harms of patriarchy, and a live performance from Thistle Pedersen. Radical organizations like Deep Green Resistance rely on individual donors to support our activism around the world, which is why The Girls and the Grasses is also a fundraiser. Whether or not you are in a position to donate, we welcome you all to an event dedicated to ecofeminism.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Girls and the Grasses, a special 3-hour live streaming event in support of the unique and powerful roles that women play in the environmental movement. We will hear directly from women who are on the front lines of resistance to the ongoing destruction of nature. And we are also excited to feature Heide Guttner-Abendroth, who will speak to her research on social structures. For better or worse, I will be your host today. My name is Katie Bossler. I work as an investigative environmental journalist and a recent graduate of Columbia University, where I did not study art, but I feel like maybe I should have. In my journalism work, I seek to amplify those who are on the front lines of land defense, which is how I find myself here today. Joining me as my co-host is Trinity LaFay, who has direct experience with Deep Green Resistance as an active member based in Colorado. She will be able to share why supporting efforts like the Coalition of Women of DGR leads to practical gains against the destruction of what is wild in the world and wild within ourselves. Thank you, Trinity.
Thank you so much, Katie. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. While the mainstream environmental movement is mainly funded by organizations that largely do not advocate for foundational revolutionary change, Deep Green Resistance is a radical organization and therefore relies on individual donors like yourselves. Today, we are raising funds to support local and global community organizing, to provide mutual aid and for direct action campaigns, and to sustain outreach. Feminism is an environmental issue, and environmentalism is a feminist issue. Whether or not you're able to donate today, I want to thank you all for joining us for The Girls and Grasses. If you are able to donate today, I'd like to direct you to the chat where you will find the Give Butter link for The Girls and the Grasses, or you can go directly to givebutter.com/The Girls and the Grasses. That's all one word, The Girls and the Grasses, all lowercase. Deep Green Resistance is radical feminist, radical environmentalist organization. We organize against patriarchal culture. The funding from this event will go directly toward helping those initiatives around the world that particularly help women. And now, without any further ado, Leah Keith performing The Girls and the Grasses.
Our brains are 2 million years in the making. That long, slow accretion doubled our cranial capacity. And the first thing we did with it was say, thank you. We drew the megafauna and the megafemales, sculpted and carved them. The oldest figurative sculpture is the goddess of Holofels. And 40,000 years ago, someone spent hundreds of hours carving her. There is no mystery here, not to me. The animals and the women gave us life. Of course, they were our first endless art project. Awe and thanksgiving are built into us, body and brain. Once upon a time, we knew we were alive, and it was good. And now we leave the realm of miracles and enter hell. Patriarchy is the ruling religion of the planet. It comes in variations, some old, some new, some ecclesiastical, some secular, but at bottom, they are all necrophilic. Eric Fromm describes necrophilia as, quote, the passion to transform that which is alive into something unalive, to destroy for the sake of destruction, the exclusive interest in all that is purely mechanical. In this religion, the worst sin is being alive, and the carriers of that sin are female. Under patriarchy, the female body is loathsome, its life-giving fat cells vilified, its generative organs despised. Its natural condition is always ridiculed. Normal feet must be turned into 4-inch stubs. Rib cages must be crushed into collapse. Breasts are varyingly too big or too small or excised entirely. That this inflicts pain, if not constant agony, is not peripheral to these practices. It's central. When she suffers, she is made obedient. Necrophilia is the endpoint of sadism. The sadistic urge is about control, quote, the passion to have absolute and unrestricted control over a living being. The objective of inflicting pain and degradation is to break a human being. Pain is always degrading. Victimization humiliates. Eventually, everyone breaks. The power to do that is the sadist's dream. And who could be more broken to your control than a woman who can't walk? Some nouns: glass, scissors, razors, acid. Some verbs: cut, scrape, cauterize, burn. These nouns and verbs create unspeakable sentences when the object is a 7-year-old girl with her legs forced open. The clitoris, with its 8,000 nerve endings, is always sliced up. In the most extreme forms of female genital mutilation, the labia are cut off and the vagina is sewn shut. On her wedding night, the girl's husband will penetrate her with a knife before his penis. You don't do this to a human being. You do it to an object. That much is true, but there is more. Because the world is full of actual objects, cardboard boxes and abandoned cars, and men don't spend their time torturing those. They know we aren't objects, that we have nerves that feel and flesh that bruises. They know we have nowhere else to go when they lay claim to our bodies. That's where the sadist finds his pleasure. Pain produces suffering, humiliation perhaps more, and if he can inflict that on her, it's absolute proof of his control. Behind the sadist are the institutions, the condensations of power that hand us to him. Every time a judge rules that women have no right to bodily integrity, that upskirt photos are legal, that miscarriages are murder, that women should expect to be beaten, he wins. Every time the fashion masters make heels higher and clothes smaller, he smiles. Every time an entire class of women, the poorest and most desperate, at the bottom of every conceivable hierarchy, are declared legal commodities for sex, he gets a collective hard-on. Whether he personally uses any such women is beside the point. Society has ruled they are there for him. If feminism was reduced to one word, it would be this: no. No is a boundary, spoken only by a self who claims one. Objects have neither. Subjects begin at no. Feminists said no, and we meant it. The boundary of no extended outward, an insult to one being an injury to all. We is the word of political movements. Without it, women are cast adrift in a hostile, chaotic sea, holding our breath against the next bad thing. With the lens of feminism, the chaos snaps into sharp focus. We give words to the bad things, then face down denial and despair to see the pattern. That's called theory. Then we demanded remedies. That's what subjects, especially political subjects, do. Emmeline Pankhurst, leader of the British suffragettes, worked at the census office as a birth registrar. Every day, young girls came in with their newborns. Every day, she had to ask who the father was. And every day, the girls wept in humiliation and rage. Reader, you know who the fathers were. That's why Pankhurst never gave up. To say no to the sadist is to assert those girls as political subjects, as human beings with the standing that comes from inalienable rights. Each and every life is self-willed and sovereign. Each life can only be lived in a body, not an object to be broken down for parts, a living body. Child sexual abuse is especially designed to turn the body into a cage. The bars may start as terror and pain, but they will harden to self-loathing. Instilling shame is the best method to ensure compliance. We are ashamed. Sexual violation is very good at that, and for the rest of our lives, we will comply. Our compliance is, of course, his control. His power is his pleasure, and another generation of girls will grow up in bodies they will surely hate to be women who comply. Gender demarcates the geopolitical boundaries of patriarchy. It divides us in half, but it's not a horizontal half. It's vertical. Gender is not some cosmic yin and yang. It's a fist and the flesh that bruises. It's a mouth crushed shut and a girl who will never be the same. If you were born female, you were born on a battlefield. You will be punished for even saying that out loud. But the grim truth is, you're going to be punished no matter what for the sin of being female. Battering is the most commonly committed violent crime in the United States. That's a man beating a woman. Men do that every 18 seconds. That's more hatred than I can comprehend. Right now, that battlefield is such a slaughter, we can't even collect our wounded. An example? Well, there are entire villages in India where all the women only have one kidney. That's because their husbands have sold the other one. And there are people who want to argue that gender is some kind of sexy, fun performance or an identity we all get to choose. When all the women only have one kidney, that is not a performance and it is not an identity. It's an atrocious human rights violation against an entire class of people called women. And that is the meaning of gender and precisely why it needs to be abolished. Transgender activist Joelle Ruby Ryan has written that the terms, quote, female and, quote, sex class are, quote, offensive and passé. One might reasonably wonder why Ryan is eager to claim membership in a group so declared, or what Ryan got a job teaching women's studies if, quote, female is so offensive. That a biological reality, female, can be called offensive shows how far down the rabbit hole queer theory has fallen. What's next, gravity? But to make sex class a dirty word means that the reality of women's lives have become once more unspeakable, each woman isolated in an inchoate anguish. Apply the word sex class, and that isolation snaps into a sharp pattern of subordination, from the small daily insults to body and soul, to the shattering traumas of incest and rape. The crimes men commit against women aren't done to women as random individuals. They're done because women belong to a subordinate class, and they're done to keep women a subordinate class. The genderists don't want to resist gender. They are, in fact, quite attached to it. Writes one, quote, "It would be a crying shame if woman and man ceased to be relevant categories for me to play with. Substitute poor and rich or black and white and understand that people being oppressed are not categories to be played with. Especially, they are not masturbation fodder. If you understand that, the only question left is, are women people?" The strangest part of this whole debate is that feminists are being called, quote, biological incestualists. The genderists posit the immortal, even cosmic nature of femininity. A typical comment, quote, "There is a distinct, substantive, immutable feminine gender, and it cannot be transcended." They boldly state their belief in, quote, brain sex. White supremacists are the only people who believe in, quote, the Negro brain, but talk of, quote, lady brains is completely accepted across progressive communities if it comes from genderists. Feminists, in contrast, start with Simone de Beauvoir, "One is made, not born a woman." It's that making that we intend to stop. It can be stopped because gender is a social process. It's the genderists who claim it's biological, immutable, yet we get called essentialists. And it's the genderists who conform. For all their talk of gender bending, their goal is cosmetics, costumes, and surgery to match their bodies to gender caricatures. They are permanently altering their bodies, removing healthy organs, and in some cases, the ability to ever experience sexual pleasure again, to better fit a corrupt and brutal arrangement of power. This is now being done to children, and some of the children already regret it. The prison of gender is locking down ever tighter. And the female body is the cage. Most women are at constant war with their bodies, and it's a war we lose before first grade. 50% of preschool girls think they are, quote, too fat. If a girl makes it through that battlefield, with its devastating cultural terrain of dehumanizing and sadistic images, the big guns are waiting. By the time they're 10, 90% of girls have been subjected to unwanted sexual attention by neighborhood boys. By the time they're 11, it's adult men threatening the violations to that same 90%. This is the meaning of female in patriarchy, learned early and often, an object to be publicly used. Get used to it, girls. Meanwhile, eating disorders, the slow grinding punishment of the female fat cell, have the highest mortality of all mental illness. The most heartbreaking element of the transgender narrative is their hatred of their bodies. In the war between culture and nature, gender and body, the body loses, and that defeat is turned into an identity. The only parallel claim is made by the anorexics, pro-anas, who insist their wrenching disjuncture of self and body is a legitimate identity. There is no doubt that people hate their bodies. Willful starvation and surgical mutilation speak with a stark, eloquent evidence. The question is, why? Guy Debord wrote presciently of the society of the spectacle, where, quote, being becomes having, and having is reduced to merely appearing. This is, of course, what has happened, and then some. Commodity fetishism has conquered every human relationship, including, finally, that between body and self. What has been done to our bodies has been done to our planet. The sadist exerts his control. The necrophiliac turns the living into the dead. The self-willed and the wild are their targets, and their necrophilic project is almost complete. Taken one by one, the facts are appalling. In my lifetime, the Earth has lost half her wildlife. Every day, 200 species slip into that longest night of extinction. Ocean is synonymous with the words abundance and plenty. Fullness is on the list, as well as infinity. And by 2048, the oceans will be empty of fish. Crustaceans are experiencing complete reproductive failure. In plain terms, their babies are dying. Plankton are also disappearing. Maybe plankton are too small and green for anyone to care about, but know this: 2 out of 3 animal breaths are made possible by the oxygen plankton produce. If the oceans go down, we go down with them. We can do better than mass starvation, failed states, ethnic strife, misogyny, petty warlords, and the dystopian scenarios that collapse brings. It's very simple. Reproduce at less than replacement levels. The problem will take care of itself. And now we come to the girls. What drops the birth rate universally is raising the status of women. Very specifically, the action with the greatest impact is teaching a girl to read. When women and girls have even that tiny bit of power over their lives, they choose to have fewer children. Yes, women need birth control, but what we really need is liberty. But feminists said every woman's body was sacred, and we mean it too. Every creature has her own physical integrity, an inviolable whole. It's a whole too complex to understand, even as we live inside it. Being alive is a gift, the only gift. That soft animal body is all you have, and it needs your defense here at the end of the world. Refuse to fight his war on the terrain of your flesh. Fight him instead. We're going to have to match his contempt with our courage. We're going to have to match his brute power with our fierce and fragile dreams. And we're going to have to match his bottomless sadism with a determination that will not bend and will not break and will not stop. And if we can't do it for ourselves, we have to do it for the girls and the grasses. Whatever you love, it is under assault, but love is a verb. May that love call us to action. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah Keith. We were enraptured. Clearly your puppy was too. We got a cute little cameo. What I appreciate about this coalition of women is the shared talent of being able to name the problems we face in such exacting ways. And Leah is certainly a master of precision with brilliant use of language. I mean, Foucault and Frankenstein, who comes up with that? You heard it here first, folks. So thank you so much for your articulation, Leah, who we will hear again from later in the event. And thank you to those of you who are just tuning in to the Girls in the Grasses, where we are hearing directly from women on the front lines of action and thought in the environmental movement, with the goal to raise funds for their important work. Of course, art and poetry always plays important roles in movements. And in addition to being an activist, Trinity LaFay is a poet, and she will share some of her work with you now.
So I wrote this, I have to tell a story, after I got back from Thacker Pass, and I read this article by a man named Peter Brennan in The Atlantic called "The Terrifying Warning Lurking in the Earth's Ancient Rock Record," which is a brilliant article. I'd recommend it to anyone. Then around that time, the women in Mexico City did a massive protest, and they burned the names of their dead women into this police barricade with hairspray bottles. So do look the article up, please. The Eocene. Men and women evolved together, or we wouldn't have evolved. The trees and the mycorrhiza made us possible, among countless others. We grew around the fire. We congregated along the water. We are Ice Age creatures. Did you know that? We're all Ice Age creatures now. Everything that survived, even the elders, even the trees and the mycorrhiza, the benevolent, the merciful, breathes ice now, only because life grew that ice from out of the fires one great year at a time. All down cycles of oxygenation, the breath and the life birthed a delicate web of oscillations interlaced, all tug and sway as it is death and decay who decide what we are next made of. We are made of fire and ice. The land and the sky used to breathe hot water, and they will again. Men used to burn the women alive in the fire. They declared themselves the owners of children. We no longer congregate around the fire in life, but in ritual. The water is brought to us. The goddesses of trees and mushrooms. The round goddesses of fruits, the slender goddesses of snakes, the goddesses of fire, of death, of medicine, of hot water, of poison, of birthing, of ice, were supplanted, her groves deforested, her rivers desecrated by a god of lies and rape and war, a god whose vision lacks depth, whose values are glory and obscurity, a singular contradiction of sightless omnipresence. He deforested her groves. He desecrated her rivers. What is happening in the following sentences? God raped Mary. Nemesis was raped by Zeus. Reindeer is a raped woman. In 2017, 20,000 women in Asia were killed by men they knew. The intimate partners or family members of African women murder them at the rate of 3.1 per 100,000. That's 1 every 3 hours, 1 every 3 days in the UK, 10 a day in Mexico, 3 a day in the US, dead, murdered by men, not strangers. The men show each other videos of freezing the women out, of beating and tying and lighting them up, of bucking them to death. The girls don't see it coming. There are no women close enough to them by the fire to give them fair warning. All the ice is melting and it feels so good to be warm for the first time. Wildfires rage land into sky. The men think pain is like a hobby to pick the side of, and losing interest in angry women collectively decide they'd rather fuck children and do it in high heels and lipstick. They refuse to admit it, but they refuse to stop it. They refuse to admit it. They refuse to stop it. They refuse to admit it. They refuse to stop it, and then all the ice is gone, replaced by hot water. We were never evolved to respirate, and maybe it never mattered so much what anyone said under the dominion of a god of lies. The women breathed fire. They took their daughters outside and taught them how to do it. The women stopped talking. and started burning. Golveg outshone Odin. Iahova was outdone by Anat. Allah is undone. The women did not want to be killers in the same way. The women could not be rapists in the same way. The women would not leave the fire again. They would not let their children belong to the men. They will remember ice with bitterness, as is just. They will congregate along the water and move with it. They will grow old around fire, maybe giving substance and meaning to words like mercy, like benevolence. Maybe men and women will face extinction apart. Either way, we face it along with every other Ice Age creature we are never going to see again. What is there to say? What do you tell your daughter? Do you tell her about the ice? What is her life anyway? Does she know how to breathe fire? Does she know about the men?
Wow, thank you, Trinity. I thought it was really beautiful that you framed it with the Ice Age. We get so caught up in the day-to-day disasters. To have that geologic epic as the bookends was really nicely done. So thank you so much for that. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Please forgive my lack of German accent here. Heide Guttner Abendroth. She is a German philosopher and researcher of culture and society. She's focused on matriarchal studies. She is taught at the University of Munich and was visiting professor at the University of Montreal, Canada, and the University of Innsbruck, Austria. She organized and guided 2 world congresses on matriarchal studies, and she was nominated as one of 1,000 women for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I am your host, Jennifer Mernan, for the Girls in the Grasses keynote address. And now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our keynote speaker to our audience. Dr. Heide Guttner Abendroth is a mother and grandmother. She earned her PhD in philosophy of science at the University of Munich, where she lectured for 10 years from 1973 to 1983. She has published on philosophy of science and extensively on matriarchal society and culture, and through her lifelong research on matriarchal societies has become a founder of modern matriarchal studies. Her magnum opus, Matriarchal Societies, Studies on Indigenous Cultures Across the Globe, published in 2013 by Peter Lang, New York, defines scientifically this new field of knowledge and provides a world tour of examples of contemporary matriarchal cultures. She has been a visiting professor at the University of Montreal in Canada and the University of Innsbruck in Austria. She lectured extensively at home and abroad. In 1986, she founded the International Academy Hagia for Matriarchal Studies in Germany, and since then has been its director. She guided 3 world congresses on matriarchal studies, 2003 in Luxembourg, 2005 in Texas, and 2011 in Switzerland. In 2012, she received an award for her scholarship from the Association for the Study of Women and Mythology in San Francisco. She was twice a nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005 by a Swiss initiative and 2007 by a Finnish initiative. Her websites are www.goetner.de and www.hagia.de. Welcome to the Girls and the Grasses, Dr. Heide Guttner Abendroth.
for this very kind welcome. I'm very pleased to be with you and to be able to present to you the principles of sustainable societies, matriarchy as a radical alternative. I think in these times we need radical alternatives. I would say some words at the beginning and then show you an overview of my speech so that nobody will lose the red thread. Some words at the beginning. Most of the discussions about sustainability are focused on a sustainable economy called ecology. The question is not raised what a sustainable society would look like. Instead, it is ignored that the economy is not independent from its special form of society. However, in each society, the most important factor are humans. For by their way of economy, they are changing the earth to the greatest part, be it to the better or from bad to worse. It is thus crucial which model of society people have in mind. Here we can see the necessary connection between economy and research on cultures. Today, it is of utmost importance that we learn from sustainable societies, that means the egalitarian matriarchal form of society, which is based on a sustainable economy. In matriarchal societies, the basic group of life, mothers, children, earth, is at the center. This is valid in all existing indigenous matriarchal societies, of which some still exist across the globe. They maintain the balance between the genders, the generations, and humans and nature. Now, let us have a closer look at this. This is the first part of my presentation called Matriarchies as Mother-Centered Societies, in which I want to present to you very short some results of modern matriarchal studies. Now I switch in on my overview of my speech. First part, matriarchies as mother-centered societies. I will present them at the social level, the economic level, the political level, and the cultural level. The second part is matriarch politics, how to get rid of patriarchy.
So this next segment that we're moving into, we're calling activist report backs. And as most of you are probably fully aware, mainstream media does not do a good job of covering protests. And when they do, it's often focused on sensationalism and not on the underlying missions and messages. So we're very excited to bring you directly some of those voices who are currently active in campaigns. First, we'll hear from Stephanie Say. Stephanie is a member of Deep Green Resistance and was the media coordinator with the Montana-based Buffalo Field Campaign from 2004 to 2021, a group working in part to defend the country's last wild migratory buffalo, the Yellowstone herds. Very cool. Stephanie continues to advocate for wild buffalo and will soon be announcing the launch of her new organization, one that is completely, and I don't think I've ever said this set of words together before, buffalo-centric, and stays true to the buffalo's perspective. During her nearly 20 years in the presence of wild buffalo, she has had direct interactions and experiences with these gentle giants as she sees them, and has come to understand that while we may be trying to save the buffalo, in fact, it's the buffalo who are desperately trying to teach us to save us from ourselves. I hope we listen. Stephanie, say, what do you have for us?
Hey, thank you so much for having me here today. I wish that I had more to offer. As you mentioned, I was with Buffalo Field Campaign until 2021 of March this past year, and they fired me, apparently because I love buffalo too much. There's a hunt, a state and treaty hunt that takes place on the borders of Yellowstone National Park. And for whatever reason, Buffalo Field Campaign doesn't want to talk about the treaty hunt. Apparently that doesn't exist. Apparently it doesn't make any impact on the buffalo. And because I resisted this, I'm no longer with the organization. But the buffalo are still in trouble, and the hunt is taking place, and the hunt does have a very, very serious impact on the buffalo. And it's ironic because it's people who call these buffalo their relatives who are actually participating in this. And what it looks like literally looks like are hunters lining up on the edge of Yellowstone National Park, waiting for buffalo to cross that imaginary meaningless line, walking into the national forest land where they can be hunted. And these hunters wait for them to do that. And then they gun down every single buffalo that they possibly can. They don't care where they're really aiming. They don't even know half the time what they're aiming at. And oftentimes entire family groups of 20 or more buffalo will get gunned down at one time, including adult females who are pregnant. And we oftentimes find fully formed baby buffalo calves in the gut piles of their mothers. And this is supposed to be okay. This is supposed to be ignored. And that is the direction that Buffalo Field Campaign is taking now. And it's a shame. It's a disservice to the buffalo. So my friend Jaden Medicine Elk and I are starting our own organization where we can tell the truth. We can talk about this hunt. We can show people what is happening to the buffalo on a daily basis. And our organization is called Roam Free Nation. And as mentioned earlier, it will be buffalo centric. It will not be based on human needs. It will be based on what the buffalo need. And so we're working on getting that launched. And as soon as we do, we will let everybody know. And I hope that you will follow with us and join us in our work to protect the buffalo. But we intend to continue to be on the ground in the presence of the buffalo, watching, monitoring, documenting, sharing their story with everyone, the media, the public, everyone who can make a difference. I'm not sure what else to talk about, but I think one thing that's pretty cool to mention, especially in this situation here, is that buffalo are a matriarch society. The family groups are led by the grandmothers and the mothers and the aunties. They're the ones that teach all the young ones where to go to find the best food, the best paths to take when the conditions are harsh, when the snow is very deep, the best place to get water, the best places to avoid predators. And it is the females who lead the way for the buffalo. Even when you see the big burly bulls battling it out and they're so tough and cool and awesome, which they are, they still have to defer to the females for the rights to mate. Which I think is pretty cool. And so again, it's the buffalo who we are trying to learn from, trying to be better human beings, learning from how they interact with the world. And yeah, these gentle giants are great teachers, and they desperately need our help. So I hope you'll follow us. Right now, you can find me and a bunch of us on Facebook through a group called Buffalo Lovers. We're pretty active. And again, we're going to be starting Roam Free Nation here pretty soon. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll let you all know when that actually launches. And we're pretty excited about it, excited to finally be able to tell the whole truth and not hide behind any human constraints. So we're looking forward to really representing the buffalo in a much more meaningful way. And I really do appreciate being able to be on here with you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. I love your necklace. I didn't realize that loving buffalo too much was a job hazard, but crazy times we live in.
Indeed.
And for your comment as well, often in conservation management, I know from my own reporting, a lot of those efforts can be compromised by, luxury human needs. So what your organization is doing, setting the ecological needs at the top and problem solving from there is so important. So we'll look forward to following along and seeing how that develops and hearing the truth directly from you and all of your experience and wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Up next, we have Carol Tutil. Carol is a longtime citizen activist and one of the original Fairy Creek forest defenders. She has been trying to inform the public and politicians about the state of our forests for decades. Of course, lots going on at Fairy Creek. Hopefully you're all following that in the news. And now we'll hear directly from her. Carol, thank you.
Oh, hi there. I haven't prepared anything, but we're certainly in interesting times. And I'll talk a little bit about the Wet'suwet'en related to Fairy Creek. Here we are in British Columbia with, perhaps the worst flooding that we've ever suffered from. And the reason for the bulk of the reason, the biggest cause of our floods is not just climate change, although obviously that's part of all our issues now, but it is the clear-cut logging that has basically destroyed almost all of our big treed forests. So now getting back to Fairy Creek and our forests. So the British Columbia government once again has come up with another talk and log scheme where they're promising deferrals, which are just, amounts to deferring deferrals. It's a game they play. And I hate to say it, but the NDP, the New Democratic Party, they're meant to be the People's Party, are anything but. They are actually, I call them the party of liars because they're so deceptive. So they've devised a scheme now to keep everybody hoping that they're going to bring in deferrals. And now it's, our Aboriginal peoples have less than a month to decide if they want to approve these deferrals. Now, don't forget, deferrals are deferrals. That's not protection. We have, of the forests with very large trees, only 2.7% left of the 3% of BC's forests that can actually be habitat or actually house those sorts of forests. We have logged, literally 98% of the forests that the world knows BC for, the huge trees. And these forests are not only the most productive in the way of carbon absorption and mitigation, they're the most productive of, for biodiversity. And it really is a resource extraction police state because we're the free breadbasket of the world in many respects. I mean, Canada is, the Bolivia, Ecuador, Amazon of the North.
Thank you so much. We're going to have to move on to Beth Robeson, who is a radical feminist DGR member, who is working on protecting Thacker Pass.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Robson, and I'm working with the Protect Thacker Pass campaign to try to stop the Thacker Pass lithium mine in northern Nevada. Thacker Pass is a high mountain pass in northern Nevada between the Double H Mountains and the Montana Mountains. The lithium deposit in the caldera is the most significant lithium clay deposit in the United States, which is why companies are now interested in mining this area. Thacker Pass is called Pahimaha, or Rotten Moon, by the local northern Paiute Western Shoshone people, or Nuwu, as they call themselves. Some of their people were massacred at Pahimaha, and the remains of the people were discovered under the light of the full moon, which is why it's called Pahimaha. The native people of this area currently live at the Fort McDermott Reservation, just to the east of Thacker Pass. Pahimaha is sacred land for them. They hunt there, they gather medicine there. There are over 1,000 cultural sites that have been identified in Pahimaha, which will be dug up in preparation for the mine. Will Falk and Max Wilbert first set up camp at Thacker Pass on January 15th of this year, the same day the BLM approved the Lithium Americas Corporation lithium mine. We are at Thacker Pass to protect the land, the water, the plants, and animals, and to work with the people who will be most affected by this mine to resist this mine. Since January 15th, 4 environmental organizations, including Wildlands Defense and Basin and Range Watch, joined together to file a lawsuit. Will Falk successfully argued earlier this year to allow the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, the Burns Paiute Tribe, and the people of Red Mountain to join this lawsuit as well. In addition, an area rancher named Ed Bartel has also filed a lawsuit. We are working on a variety of legal approaches to resist this mine. The Thacker Pass mine will be the largest open-pit lithium mine in the United States. It covers 17,000 acres of land and will completely destroy almost 6,000 acres and possibly more if Lithium Americas opens mines in other areas of the caldera, which they are exploring. It will consist primarily of a large pit where lithium will be removed from the ground with explosives and diggers. It will include waste rock piles, a sulfuric acid refinery to make sulfuric acid that's used to leach lithium from the clay, dry tailings stacks, new water wells, and a pipeline to transport water to the mining site, new electrical grid lines to power the mine, new roads to bring in equipment, workers, and 100 to 200 daily trips of large trucks carrying molten sulfur from the train station in Winnemucca, and more daily trips of large trucks delivering diesel fuel to run the refinery. 11,500 gallons of diesel or more will be used per day to run the refinery. Molten sulfur is produced as a byproduct of oil refining. A huge source of sulfur for refining is the Alberta tar sands, which, as you know, is the most destructive mining project on Earth. And yet, Lithium Americas has the audacity to call this mine green because they are extracting lithium for EV batteries. Here is a 3D rendering from Lithium Americas' mining plan. Our camp is located in the area where the red dot is on this map. The camp area is right in the area where the huge mining pit will be located. As you can see, along with the pit itself, huge mountains of tailings and waste rock, and of course the refinery and processing areas, will also destroy the land in Thacker Pass. This is what this area in Thacker Pass looks like now. As I said earlier, it's a high mountain pass, part of the sagebrush sea that covers northern Nevada, and is home to 300 or more species of wildlife and plants, including Crosby's buckwheat, old-growth sagebrush, sage grouse, pygmy rabbits, golden eagles, hawks, falcons, pronghorn, deer, and so many more. If Lithium Americas mines Thacker Pass, this area will be destroyed forever. As you may know, sagebrush steppe habitat is threatened all over the American West with wildfire due to climate change, development, mining, and cattle grazing. So the long-term consequences of mining at Thacker Pass includes groundwater poisoning from arsenic and other heavy metals, including potentially uranium, air pollution from diesel, ozone, lead, sulfur dioxide, dust, and CO2, complete destruction of the land in the mining area. Toxic waste management will be required forever to maintain groundwater pollution and plumes from the tailings, waste rock, and pit. CO2 emissions from the mine would directly release the equivalent of 152,000 tons of carbon dioxide each year, equivalent to the greenhouse gas emissions of a small city. And yet Lithium Americas promotes this mine as green. Overall, demand for minerals and metals to supply battery storage and EV batteries is growing incredibly fast as part of the push for so-called clean energy and clean technology. Batteries for EVs and battery storage require lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, aluminum, and copper. The International Energy Agency is forecasting that by 2040, lithium demand will grow by 40 times, nickel demand will grow by 140 times, cobalt demand will grow by 70 times, and so on. And this is just for the battery and EV sectors. These minerals and metals are already in demand for all kinds of industry, and now we are adding huge amounts of solar, wind, battery storage, and EVs to that demand. This translates to a huge increase in the amount of mining. So how can you help? You can come to camp, you can donate, you can sign the People of Red Mountain petition, you can write an op-ed, you can talk with your local environmental groups, you can protest at appropriate places, including Tesla dealerships, the offices of the various companies and groups who are pushing this mine. You can contribute writing, art, and poetry to our website. You can contact representatives and officials. If you're a tribe member, please ask your tribal council to support the People of Red Mountain, and you can add your organization name to the list of groups that are supporting the opposition of the mine. To close, I'm sharing a few photos from Thacker Pass. I invite you all to go to our website and our social media sites to see more photos and videos from Thacker Pass, as well as some of the incredible art and writing that artists are sharing with us inspired by Thacker Pass. Thank you.
All right, that was Beth Robeson. And due to time constraints, we're going to play the next 3 activist videos all in a row. And while you're listening to them, please do go to the Give Butter page and take a look at our silent auction, whose links are in the chat. That's GiveButter/The Girls and the Grasses. And coming up now, we have Siri Neppelberg, who is an environmentalist from Stockholm and has been participating in one of the actions organized by a campaign called Forest Rebellion. Then Julia Barnes, a documentary filmmaker and activist. She has produced the film Sea of Life and Bright Green Lies, and is currently working on a short film about deep sea mining. Then up next, we have Namwaka Waluka, a 38-year-old woman living in rural Zambia. She's an environmentalist, a tree planter, and hugger. Namwaka has been planting trees ever since she can remember. She hopes to make a healthier and greener planet to live in for both humans and all living things. Take it away.
Hi, my name is Siri Neppelberg. I live in the south of Sweden and I have been participating during one of the actions organized by a campaign called the Forest Rebellion. This campaign was started a year ago between activists from Sami communities, Extinction Rebellion Sweden, and other groups and organizations have been involved as well. It was started as a response to this vast clear-cutting that is happening up north on Sami territory. And just to compare, this is what the forests of the north should look like, with trees that are hundreds of years old. Only 0.5% of the old growth is left in Sweden in total. And these are some of the people whose homes are being rapidly destroyed and replaced by pine plantations. Now 90% of all the forests are under 100 years old in age, and the majority is under 60. The state-owned logging corporation called Sveaskog is the main actor in this activity, and also a corporation that this campaign is targeting. Some of the people who started this campaign have written a text to give some background to this situation, and I thought I would read an excerpt from it. The Swedish state's abuse of the forests is a continuation of over 400 years of colonialism in Sápmi and the indigenous Sami people who have lived in northern Scandinavia for thousands of years before the nation-states existed. The land was stolen for mining, hydroelectric dams, and large-scale logging industries. To this day, the Swedish state is ignoring consultations with the Sami people about extraction of resources and infrastructure projects on the land which is not rightfully owned by the state. So this campaign is organizing non-violent direct action to protest against the felling of the last so-called natural forests in Sápmi. And they have also stated 3 demands. Demand 1 is to stop the destruction of our forests, stop logging in all remaining natural forests, and clear-cutting practices, and let tree plantations develop into living biodiverse ecosystems again. Demand 2 is to decolonize Sápmi. Forestry affecting traditional Sami reindeer herding, hunting and fishing lands must only happen with Sami consent, and land in Sápmi that has been stolen by the state must eventually be returned to Sami stewardship. Demand 3 is to democratize our forests. Let a citizens' assembly create a framework for fair and equitable management of forests outside Sápmi, which combats the ongoing climate catastrophe and mass extinction and leaves healthy forests for future generations. The primary tool of action is forest occupations happening on Sami territory with open invitation from Sami communities to protest industrial logging and target the Swedish state and actors working on behalf of it. In April this year, actions were held on 2 locations. At this place, called Paharova, people locked themselves onto logging machines belonging to this corporation that were standing still during the night at a place that they were cutting. They built this birch teepee that was later burnt down by the police. On this other place, called Joksovara, there's this forest that has been cut and thinned in stages but never clear-cut before. So it had more biodiversity in it in comparison to other forests in the same category. But now this corporation has begun to clear-cut this area. The white patches here are all clear-cuts. This was something that the campaign wanted to protest against, so they blocked a road, keeping workers from accessing wood that they had logged. And employees from the corporation showed up with a machine, drove towards the camp. People stood in the way, forced it up onto the side, and claimed it with lock-ons and banners. The police gave us a visit, but left, and they showed up a couple of days later when more people had joined, bigger obstacles had been made, and they surrounded us early morning, forced us to stay in place while they could bulldoze another old road into the forest, which we had missed to spot since it was covered in snow. So the camp got dismantled during the coming days. It held for 10 days in total, I think. It was a small, dedicated team that started these actions, and when things started to happen, people were traveling from all over the country to get to these locations. They have gained a lot of publicity, and it seems like there's a spurring interest for forest occupations. Coalitions are being made between different people, different groups and networks who all care about the forests. And this is just the beginning for this campaign, so I'd like to encourage you to follow it if you want and stay put for future actions. Thank you so much.
I'm Julia Barnes. I'm part of the campaign to stop deep sea mining. Deep sea mining is an industry that most people haven't heard about, but it is also being fast-tracked right now. Recently, a small island nation called Nauru triggered a rule that would allow deep sea mining to begin in 2 years, regardless of whether regulations have been put in place. So the idea that the floodgates could open up for this new industrial activity on the high seas in an already decimated ocean is pretty terrifying. So we very quickly formed a group of people and started this campaign. We're calling ourselves Deep Sea Defenders, and our goal is to prevent deep sea mining from happening. Because if this industry goes ahead, it will really be a disaster for the ocean. The areas that are planned to be mined will be scraped of these things called polymetallic nodules. That's what the mining companies are interested in. And these polymetallic nodules are actually really critical as habitat for a lot of species in the deep sea. They're often the only hard substrate that organisms can attach to. But on top of this, the rest of the substrate down there is this muddy, silty sediment. And having these huge mining vehicles go down there is going to kick a lot of this up. And with currents in the deep sea, this is going to move and affect an area much larger than the area being mined. Organisms who can't move will be buried and smothered, and they're also planning on pumping sediment wastewater into the midwater zone in the ocean. So this is fine particulate matter that can get into the gills of fish and disrupt their ability to breathe. This is, really dangerous for the ocean. We also have to understand that the deep sea is the largest active carbon sink on the planet. So stirring up sediment down there is going to release a lot of carbon back into the environment. It's going to increase the acidity of the water and could damage the ability of the deep sea to continue sequestering carbon. So deep sea mining is so dangerous. It shouldn't be allowed to go ahead. And we've been doing a lot of research behind the scenes and planning. And recently we put out a call to action for people to submit comments to an environmental impact statement having to do with deep sea mining. But we're also planning some things that are going to be a lot bigger and more exciting. And this is an ongoing campaign that's really just getting started, but that wouldn't be possible without deep green resistance. So I really encourage people, if they can, to donate to this fundraiser, because the work that DGR does is so important, and the community of biocentric people is something that is really unique and needed.
Hello, my name is Namakawa Luka. I'm a deep green resistance member. I live in Zambia, in a province called Western Province, in a small village called Silundu Village. So this is my project. This is what I do. This here is what I do. I plant trees, especially fruit trees, from seeds, and everything is organic. I am a climate change activist, and I'm a tree planter. So I plant all my trees, and these are lemons. Some are grafted into oranges and grapes, all types of citrus fruits. I also plant all kinds of plants, flowers. I do this to involve the community too. I plant these tree saplings, and when they grow to the stage of transplanting, I share them with the community members, those that want to plant the trees, because there has been so much deforestation happening in my village. Lately, the past few years, so much deforestation happening. So we are trying to reverse that. That's why we're planting the trees here, and we have different types of trees. We have different flowers here, and everything. We just plant everything from cutting, and everything is just organic. We are trying to fight climate change, making our planet green again. We hope that everybody will join us in the neighboring villages and communities. I also share my knowledge with the schools. I teach the pupils how to plant the trees in this sandy soil. As you can see, it's sandy soil, and mostly sandy soil has no fertilizer in it. It is very poor, barren in short. So we are trying to use compost and organic manure to make it more fertile. So I'm teaching the villagers how to plant using this same using organic manure, so that we preserve and bring the soil back to life again. So this is my nursery in short. Here we have different types of trees. We have pawpaw, papaya here, and we have apples here. I planted this from seed, and can you imagine, just 2 years ago I planted this and they are already flowering. Yes, and we have different types of trees here. We have this is eucalyptus. Yes, we have it in good numbers. Yes, we have.
Your contributions directly affect our ability to be effective resistors of that. Just a couple reminders about DGR as an organization. We are the only environmental group that is staunchly radical feminist. When it became an issue, DGR stood by women, even when it was inconvenient. And I don't know about you, but that means something to me. And that is why they have my commitment as a radical feminist organization. And now we have our panel, we've all been waiting for, and this panel will be facilitated by Sue Breen, taking part in her first direct action at 17. Susan has been an environmental activist all of her adult life. She has worked as an international coordinator for Extinction Rebellion and also as a left-wing political candidate. A lifelong radical feminist, she is a member of the Irish Women's Lobby campaigning for women's sex-based protections in Ireland. Having finally found her political home, she now spends her time organizing for Deep Green Resistance and Shale Must Fall Coalition. Please welcome Susan Breen.
Thank you so much, Trinity. It's wonderful to be here with you all, and I hope everyone's been enjoying the amazing activist reports back and all the talent in DGR. So I have the pleasure this evening of introducing our amazing panel. We have 4 panelists, and our first speaker will be Rebecca Wildbear. So Rebecca is a river and soul guide who helps people tune into the mysteries that live within the earth community, dreams, and their own wild nature, so they may live a life of creative service. She has been a guide with the Animas Valley Institute since 2006 and is author of the forthcoming book, Wild Yoga, a practice of initiation, veneration, and advocacy for Earth. And our next speaker after Rebecca will be Deanna Mayer, who is a longtime environmental activist, a member of Deep Green Resistance, and is also founder and executive director of Prairie Protection Colorado. Deanna's work currently centers on the protection and preservation of prairie dog communities up and down Colorado's Front Range. Then we will have Jennifer Mernan speaking to us. Jennifer grows and harvests medicine with herbology training from the Rocky Mountain School for Botanical Studies and the High Altitude Permaculture Institute. An aspiring forest gardener, she has been a radical activist for 10 years, including anti-racism work, political prisoner support, radical feminist activism, and frontline resistance. She has also provided platforms for radical voices, forced through the creation of Women Air, community radio, and most recently as co-host of DGR's podcast, The Green Flame. And last but not least, we will be hearing again from Leaire Keith. Leaire has been a radical feminist for 40 years. She's the author of 7 books, including The Vegetarian Myth, Food, Justice, and Sustainability, which has been called the most important ecological book of this generation. She is also co-author with Derek Jensen and Max Wilbert of Bright Green Lies, How the Environmental Movement Lost Its Way and What We Can Do About It. She lives in Northern California with giant trees and giant dogs. She's also been arrested 6 times for acts of political resistance. So each of our wonderful panelists will present on a topic close to her heart, gifting an understanding that is vital to resistance. So Rebecca is going to be our first speaker, and Rebecca is going to speak on wild eros in a porn toxic world. So Rebecca will speak for 5 minutes. Rebecca, are you with us?
I'm going to start with one of Derek's quotes from A Language Older Than Words. There is a language older by far and deeper than words. It is the language of bodies, of body on body, wind on snow, rain on trees, wave on stone. This language has been forgotten. Wild eros is the capacity to inhabit our body and perceive the web of relationships we live within as part of Earth's body. It is the innate and long-lasting pleasure of the touch of sun or rain on our skin, the fragrance of the salty sea, or the sound of wind or bird song. Slow down. Remember and experience your place of deepest belonging on wild earth. Land, sky, bones, blood, flesh call us to experience the world as holy. We are of her. Although our culture seduces us to believe that our only place in nature is as spectator, it silences the erotic and reduces women and wilderness to objects to curate and control. Our culture focuses on genitals and equates the erotic with porn. Porn is the opposite of the erotic. Porn eroticizes violence, forgets eros, hates the body, and deadens the heart. It objectifies and uses, degrades and humiliates women. In an analysis of the best-selling porn films, 88% of scenes contain physical aggression, gagging, choking, spanking, slapping. A third of all downloads in the US are porn-related. 90% of 8 to 16-year-olds have viewed porn online. Porn is undermining social, emotional, cognitive, and physical health. Porn gives its viewers a fast dopamine hit. It addicts the brain to this high and numbs the capacity to receive simple pleasures in nature, the touch of water on skin or a ray of sun through a canopy of trees. Connecting to nature activates oxytocin and serotonin, healing our nervous systems. It is the best cure for trauma. The systematic removal of our lives from participation with the natural world is our foundational trauma. Doing so makes humans easy to control. Living the erotic is subversive. It happens when our senses are turned on. It's easy to witness in children and animals. We are not machines, we are life breathing. We need to return to the innocent, natural, creative intelligence of wild eros. We can seek to feel it wherever we are. I feel it even lying under a grove of ponderosa pines on a busy road, the fragrance of native butterscotch wafting down, or the morning greeting of my puppy's wet tongue on my cheek, his tail wagging his body. It's not indulgence or hedonism, but primordial gratification and connection, a kind of deep listening and embodiment, following our instincts and intuition in union with Earth.
Thank you so much. Articulated beautifully as always, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Diana Mayer, who is going to speak to us about organizing with connection. So Diana, if you would like to speak, thank you so much.
So I work right now I protect prairie dogs over in Colorado. And I've been doing this for the last, 7 years maybe. And I protect them in the communities they support. So bobcats, prairie dogs, coyotes, the soil, the plants. I try to do whatever we can together. And we've had some good success in my organization that I started with the help of Deep Green Resistance. I just wanted to share some of the tools that I've used to organize and galvanize local advocates. And to really get them to put their feet on the ground and insist on protections for this keystone species, whose population is down to less than 1% of their historic numbers. And I'm sure if we're all paying attention, about all the native species around us are in those very troubling numbers right now. Everybody's in danger. And I feel like the only thing that we can really do is learn how to organize and get people passionate and excited and doing some work. And that's where we have to start, because we have a huge task ahead of us. Because if any of these prairie dogs that we have saved, and we have saved thousands of them, are going to live, we're going to have to stop industrial civilization from killing the ability for mammals and all other types of life to live. So what I've been really good at doing in here with my group and people who are also passionate about prairie dogs is getting us to really process our anger when we see atrocities happening up and down the Front Range with these colonies. And I mean, one way that I did it in one of my first campaigns is I just went out there and I really started to connect with the prairie dog colony that I loved. And I was able to do that too by connecting and loving land and by learning about like grassroots activism, reading a lot of Derek Jensen's work and getting involved with deep green resistance and just really learning how to bond with those prairie dogs. And I went out one day when they set out all these traps to kill this colony that I had been watching and advocating for and getting a lot of people interested in. And they put traps out there on the ground. And I said to myself, it was like just a reaction because of the love that I had for the colony, that I was going to go out and smash all those traps. And I did. And in the middle of smashing them, Fox News came out and filmed me. And that really helped get a lot of people involved in that campaign. And it became international, and we were able to save the remaining survivors on that site and get them put up here. We didn't save the land. So there's the bigger issue. It's a small victory. It was a victory. The prairie dogs are jumping around here. But I think what really helps people to get moving is to like become in love and passionate and determined for what you want to save. And in doing that, people start listening. Even now, I get all the city council members. If I call Colorado Parks and Wildlife, if I call the developers, they respond immediately. They know that they don't want me to come after them and our people and our advocates, because a lot of people get involved. And I really feel like the success that we've had is because the people who are getting involved are passionate, and they're going out there and they're taking pictures and they're filming and they're going to council meetings and they're screaming about it. And just like a lot of the other people who talked tonight, people are really throwing their body and their weight in there. And we need that. And we need to practice, because it's scary to raise our voice. It's scary to stand up for those who are dying, but it is so necessary. And the more that we do it, and the more that we're allowed to like channel that anger into something that's going to inspire other people to do things, I think the closer we're going to get to really organizing and getting a core group of people. And one other thing that I think that's been helpful for me too is like when people come into our groups, which happens a lot on the left and far too much, and they try to distract us from our goal. So my goal is saving the prairie dogs or saving the land or whatever it is. And they want to come in and bring in drama or change the subject or try to pull us off of the track of what we're actually trying to do. There needs to be consequences. If we can't redirect them, they need to be gone. And that has been helpful too, because if we sit there and facilitate these people who are trying to destroy our goal of saving life, then we are only ending up failing those who we love. And when we do that, they die and we don't succeed. And it goes back into the whole colonization culture where we just get stagnant and stuck. But yeah, I mean, I hope that helped some people. If you want to get involved in anything I'm doing, you can go to prairieprotectioncolorado.org or check us out on Facebook. And yeah, I'm really glad. I hope that you all can contribute some money to what all these wonderful people are doing in the DGR Women's Organization, and that we can all gain strength together to be brave, to have courage, and to be able to channel our anger in ways that save life. Even if it's small things at first, it needs to grow into something bigger, and we need to learn how to do that, how to get people to be drawn into putting energy into saving what we love. And thank you for letting me talk. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much, Deanna. Rousing and inspiring as always. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Jennifer Mernan, and Jennifer is going to speak on community resistance and survival. Jennifer, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. My first question is, do we know who we are? There's a book that I just recently read called Mothers and Others by Sarah Blaffer Hardy, and she delves into the core question of what makes us human. Hardy presents really convincing evidence that out of the family of primates, our species evolved in uniquely hypersocial ways due to two major factors. First, our young are extraordinarily slow in maturing, and the needs of these young cannot be met by her mother alone. It truly takes a village to raise our children. And second, without a way to store food, with no guarantee of success of the hunt, with few of our kind in existence, Hardy posits that our ancestors, hunter-gatherer Pleistocene ancestors relied on their reputations and the stored goodwill of others. We evolved into Homo sapiens by developing the emotional skills whose foundational understanding is, as Hardy comments, to care and to share is to survive. While this is a surprising insight, considering the sad state of civilized humans today, there is absolutely no reason to think that caring and sharing is an unusual or exceptional strategy for survival. Suzanne Simard's first book, Finding the Mother Tree, brings humans an intimate look at forests, revealing vital truths. Trees are cooperative creatures connected through networks by which trees communicate their vitality and their vulnerabilities. Their communal lives are not unlike our own. And at the center of it all are mother trees, the mysterious, powerful forces that connect and sustain the others that surround them. Caring and sharing is the nature of life. For all of you who were fortunate enough to have watched our keynote address, Dr. Heide Guttner-Abendroth's research into matriarchal societies reveals how perfectly these societies are structured to support the innate nature of that which makes us human and that which sustains life. Matriarchies are based on caring and sharing, kinship, centering and supporting mothers, gifting, consensus decision-making, and the maintenance of mutually beneficial relationships between humans and all the members of their biological communities and the divine feminine. These communities constitute the most elemental unit of humanity. Together, we are whole. Why am I reminding you and myself of such elemental truths about our species and about the nature of life? It's because we are so far from home and so far from nature, and we desperately need to sustain life-giving communities. We need to return home and to fight the forces that are destroying our only home. I have been fascinated by community as the nexus of resistance since reading Deep Green Resistance a decade ago. The stories of women, Maud Gonne, and the women of the suffragette movement, and the brave women providing safe shelter to Pullman porters, who later became, in Lierre Keith's words, the foot soldiers of the civil rights movement, inspired me. My dedication to community and culture as the cradle of resistance has resulted in becoming a core member of communities that protect and resist. CPR is a coalition of and for communities that work together to actively and directly resist the forces that are destroying the planet, including patriarchy and misogyny, capitalism and consumerism, racism, militarism, and environmental destruction. Excuse me. In addition to the destructions of oppression, which I've just mentioned, I think there is one more threat that I think we need to grapple with. And I believe this threat has the potential to destroy our life-giving nature completely. And we are life givers at our core. In Mother, Earth, and Sea, Renee Gerlich's first book in her brief, complete herstory series, she writes, "Remember that our species is characterized by a long period of dependency in childhood, and that 3/4 of our brain growth and almost 90% of brain development takes place after birth, mostly in the first 3 years of life. That means that human beings are profoundly affected by the attitudes and ideas around them when they are little. The prevailing systems and ideas of a culture condition children from infancy because of our utter dependency on adults and caregivers. And what do infants encounter? What do women encounter? What have civilized humans been conditioned by for hundreds, if not thousands of years now? A brutal hierarchy, pervasive violence and oppression. They've encountered patriarchy. Near the end of her book, Mothers and Others, Hardy comments, if empathy and understanding develop only under particular rearing conditions, and if an ever-increasing population of the species fails to encounter those conditions, but nevertheless survives to reproduce, it won't matter how valuable the underpinnings for collaboration were in the past. Compassion and the quest for emotional connection will fade away as surely as sight in cave-dwelling fish. As surely as our planet is being terminated, our species is being conditioned out of existence. If there is any promise, I believe, for resistance and for a future, community is the most basic unit of resistance and of humanity. We are quite surely not human without community. Thank you for letting me speak. This is an incredible, incredible event, and an incredible group of women. And now we go to the best of the best.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was so rich and deep, and all within 5 minutes. Thank you so much. And now we go back to the wonderful Lier Keith, who is going to speak on the necrosphere, patriarchy's endgame. Lier, thank you so much. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. So the first art humans ever made was of two subjects. One was the animals we ate, and the other was the pregnant female form. So the megafauna and the megafemales, because that was who gave us life. The first thing we did with our human consciousness was say thank you. I think this is the beginning of religion, and that sacredness of awe and thanksgiving is built into us, body and brain. So for 2 million years, some version of us was here, and we were not monsters and destroyers. We were participants. So imagine the length of a football field. That's our time on Earth. It's only that last half a yard that represents the time we've been doing agriculture, just the last half a yard. And the last 1/5 of an inch would be the Industrial Revolution. So at half a yard is where the disaster begins. And in maybe 14 different places around the world, people completely change their way of life with an activity called agriculture. So in very brute terms, you take a piece of land, you clear every living thing off it, and I mean down to the bacteria, and then you plant it to human use. So it's biotic cleansing. Now, in all the places where agriculture started, human society follows the same pattern, and it's called civilization. Now, that word just means people living in cities, but what that actually means is they need more than the land can give. So the food, water, energy have to come from somewhere else. And from that point forward, it doesn't matter what lovely, peaceful, nonviolent values people might hold in their hearts. That society is dependent on imperialism and genocide, because no one willingly gives up their land, their water, their trees. But since the city has used up its own, it has to go out and get those from somewhere else. And that's the last 10,000 years in a few sentences. So the symbiosis of technology and culture is what Lewis Mumford called a technic. A social milieu creates specific technologies, which in turn shape the culture. Technology is not neutral or passive in its effects. Plowshares will require swords and then armies of slaves and soldiers both. The technique that is civilization has required weapons of conquest from the beginning. Farming spread by genocide, the destruction of Cro-Magnon Europe, the culture that bequeathed us Lascaux took maybe 300 years by the farmer soldiers from the Near East. And so the work army requires the military army. Slaves have to be conquered and then controlled. Authoritarian techniques both create and then require hierarchical social relations, turning humans into machines that convert more life into more machines. So as all of this develops, the slavery, the militarism, the hierarchy, the culture becomes patriarchal. The moment men create private property, they need to control paternity, which means they need to control women. So masculinity is essential to any militarized culture, because that's the psychology necessary in soldiers. One can only kill on command if the human impulse to care for one another has been subdued or eradicated, and if the psychological process of othering is well entrenched. Now, central to masculinity is a violation imperative. Men become real men by breaking boundaries. For the entitled psyche, the only reason no exists is because it's a sexual thrill to force past it. The real brilliance of patriarchy is right here. It doesn't just naturalize oppression, it sexualizes acts of oppression. It eroticizes domination and submission, and then institutionalizes them into masculinity and femininity. So it naturalizes, it eroticizes, and then institutionalizes domination and submission. The brilliance of feminism is that we figured that out. So that masculine violation imperative includes breaking the sexual boundaries of women and children, the cultural and political boundaries of indigenous people, the biological boundaries of rivers and forests, the genetic boundaries of other species, and the physical boundaries of the atom itself. Authoritarian techniques require an internal theological rationale that life is a series of disconnected objects, not complex beings with whom we are engaged in relationships. Mechanical objects are not self-willed creatures. They don't call respect from us. They barely deserve notice. They exist to be used. Rene Descartes bragged, "I have described this earth, and indeed this whole visible world, as a machine." Our science is a series of discoveries designed to let us use them better, and use them we have. Violation is built into mechanistic science. Sir Francis Bacon, who is credited with the creation of the scientific method, was also a legal inquisitor at witch trials. His practical objective was bluntly, quote, dominion over creation, which could be achieved by the inquisition of mechanical experimentation. 300 years later, Erich Fromm describes sadism as, quote, the passion to have absolute and unrestricted control over a living being. Is there a more apt description of industrial civilization? Its technology has emptied rivers, crushed mountains, damaged the climate, and broken the boundaries of the atom itself. And the endpoint of sadism is necrophilia, quote, the passion to transform that which is alive into something unalive, to destroy for the sake of destruction, the exclusive interest in all that is purely mechanical. Or, as Mary Daly wrote in 1978, patriarchy is itself the prevailing religion of the entire planet, and its essential message is necrophilia. Having declared the cosmos lifeless, industrial humans are now transforming the biosphere into the technosphere, a dead world of our own artifacts that life as a whole may not survive. Our choice is now very stark: stand with the living or go down with the dead. So on that note, I am going to introduce Derrick Jensen. Derrick Jensen is the author of 27 books, including the acclaimed A Language Older Than Words, and also Endgame, and a bunch of other really great books that you should all read. He's been called the philosopher poet of the ecological movement, and he is sitting here on the couch beside me. So I'm just going to move over and he's going to take it from here.
So before I start, I want to lodge an official complaint against whomever devised this scheduling and order, because I think it's grotesquely unfair to expect me to follow that. So Sue or Deanna or whomever came up with this schedule, consider yourself officially complained at. I'm kidding, kind of. Anyway, so I'm going to read something called The Man Box that I wrote several years ago for, it was the request of Eve Ensler for a collaborative theater piece that she was going to do about, that was going to be the male equivalent of the Vagina Monologues, but then it never ended up coming about, but still got this piece out of it. Excuse me. Excuse me. The man box is full of proof, except that there is no man box. The man box can never be filled, and real men don't need proof. Let's start with Abraham and Isaac. You know the story. God tells Abraham to slit his child's throat. Abraham ties up his son, raises the knife, and at the last moment, God says it was a test. End of story. Lesson: Abraham shows, by his willingness to violate his child, the proof of his worth. And Isaac learns that his father was willing to kill him rather than act against the cult of masculinity, against the rules of the man box. There are many rules of the man box, even though there is no man box, and there are no rules. Why call it a box when it's the way things are? And why call it a rule when it's who you are? Rule 1, there is no man box. Rule 2, there is no box but the man box, and thou shalt have no other boxes before it. Rule 3, that's the way things are. Rule 4, that's who you are. So I'm in a restaurant, and I overhear one guy say to another that he's in pain. The other responds, suck it up. When are you going to quit being such a woman? So yes, I understand that men are taught to not feel. And yes, I understand that the cult of masculinity is all about not feeling. I understand that must be hard. But honestly, I don't give a shit about understanding the emotional state of members of the cult of masculinity, except insofar as that understanding might help stop them. It's a bit late in the game to be worried about the feelings of perpetrators. The ones I care about are their victims. Because the man box isn't about putting men in a box, it's about putting everyone else in a box. The box of other, of less than, of trophies, the box of the violable, the box of targets, the box of victims, the box of the violated, the box of proof of the men's own manhood. Have you ever done the math on how many women who are alive right now have been raped? There are almost 7 billion people on the planet, so there are about 3.5 billion women. About 1 in 4 women is raped in their lifetime, another 1 in 5 fend off rape attempts. So more than 800 million women living today will be raped in their lifetimes. Let's say half of those have not yet been raped. So 400 million women living right now have been raped, and another now, and another now. This also means, among many other things, that unless a few men are excruciatingly busy, there are a lot of rapists out there, a lot of members of the cult of masculinity, a lot of men who adhere to the rules of the man box. But you already knew that. But of course, there is no man box, and there can be no man box. Because if there were a man box, that would mean there's something outside the man box. And there's nothing outside the man box because there can be nothing outside the man box. Excuse me. And there can be nothing outside the man box because there must be nothing outside the man box. Because if there were, well, there isn't, it can't be, it mustn't be. Because if there were, that would mean members of the cult of masculinity aren't as omnipotent, as completely potent as they must be. And also because if there were, why would any victims put up with this shit? So there must not be a man box because everything is part of the man box. That is, everything is violable and everything must be violated. Rule 5, which is actually rule 1, which is actually the only rule there is, I exist only insofar as I violate you. But of course, rule 5 doesn't exist, nor does rule 1. The other day, I saw an astronomer saying why he thought it was important to explore Mars and other planets. It really said, answer that most important question of all. Are we all alone? I have an even more important question. Is he fucking crazy? No, he's just a member of the cult of masculinity. Did you know that 200 years ago, there were flocks of passenger pigeons so large they darkened the sky for days at a time? And flocks of Eskimo crows so thick that 10, 15, 20 birds would fall to a single shot. There were so many whales in North Atlantic, they were a hazard to shipping. There were runs of salmon so thick they would keep you awake all night with the slapping of their tails against the water. And he asks if we're all alone. Only if you're a member of the cult of masculinity, in which case you are, of course, alone with other members of your cult, because you have declared yourself to be the only one who matters, the one who does too, as opposed to everyone else to whom it is done. Did you know that this culture is driving 200 species extinct each and every day? Did you know that stolid scientists are saying the oceans could be devoid of fish in 50 years? And do you know why? And did you know that the world used to be filled with thousands of vibrant human cultures, and that human cultures are being driven extinct at even faster relative rate than non-human species? And do you know why? The man box is full of women, it's full of passenger pigeons, it's full of whales, it's full of indigenous humans. The man box is full of the entire world. But the man box isn't full because the man box, which does not exist, can never be full. The psychiatrist R.D. Laing famously asked, how do you plug a void plugging a void? That's the question, isn't it? But of course it isn't the question because men don't have a void. And if they did have a void, they certainly wouldn't plug it with a void. Someone once told me that any hatred, maybe any void, felt long enough no longer feels like hatred, but rather like religion, economics, science, tradition, just the way things are. With all the world at stake, I need to speak plainly. The problem is that within this patriarchy, identity itself is based on violation. Violation becomes not merely an action, but an identity, who you are and how you in society define who you are. Within this patriarchy, men's masculinity defines itself by identifying others, any and all others, as inferior, which is why those stupid fucking scientists can ask, are we all alone, as they destroy the extraordinary life on this planet, and as being therefore violable and then violating them. For men under this patriarchy, these acts of violating others are how we become who we are. They validate who we are. They then reaffirm who we are. As through these repeated acts of violation, we come to perceive each new violation as reinforcement, not only of our superiority over this other we violated, but as simply the way things are. So without this identification of others as inferior, without this violation, we are not. We're a void. And so we must fill this void, fill it with validations of our superiority, fill it with violations. Thus the rapes, thus the violation of every boundary set up by every indigenous culture, thus the extinctions, thus the insane belief in an economic system based on infinite growth, despite the fact that we live on a finite planet. Thus the refusal to accept any limits on technological progress, more properly termed technological escalation, as it really involves an escalation of the wielder's ability to control and violate at a distance, or on scientific knowledge. Thus the sending of probes to penetrate the deepest folds of the ocean floor, thus the bombing of the moon. What makes the problem even worse is that because there are always those who have yet to be violated, and because the violation isn't really solving the needs it purports to meet, it's a void plugging a void, this drive to violate is insatiable. This culture will continue to violate until there's nothing left to violate, nothing left. So what's at stake in this whole discussion is life on the planet. This cult of masculinity must not merely be left, it must not merely be exposed, it must be destroyed, or it will continue to violate its way to the end of all that's alive. But before we can leave this cult, we must understand that it's not all that is, that there is a cult of masculinity and there is a man box, and you can leave them both. Burn this into your heart. This imperative to violate is not natural, it's cultural. And we must resist every effort by the abusers, by the violators, to naturalize this drive to violate. But this is what abusers and violators must do. They must attempt to convince themselves and everyone else that their way of life is the only way, that there is no other way. They must convince themselves and everyone else that not only is there nowhere outside the cult of masculinity, nowhere outside the man box, but indeed there exists neither a cult of masculinity nor a man box. There's only one way of life, which is not just a way of life because it encompasses all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. It's everything, they say. But they're lying to themselves and to you. Even if they have an entire culture to back them up, they're still lying. We must never forget that. There's a cult of masculinity and there's a man box, and we can leave them. We can not only leave them, we can destroy them. We must. With all the world at stake, we must.
Thank you so much, Derek. And now, before we go to our closing video, I want to thank all of the panelists, all of the speakers, all of the activists, and remind all of our viewers that that Give Butter link is going to stay open. So if you can't donate today, just save it, save the video. You can go to it at any time and donate. And that is givebutter.com/girls and grasses, all lowercase, all one word. And I want to give a special thank you to Salonika, who did the bulk of organizing work, to Laura, who is our tech person, and to Max, who is our tech person behind the tech person, all who made this happen without any of the glory. Let's give it up to them now and to our closing video. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Women, lift your chants and your fists to the sky for your freedom, for your sisters, for your planet, for your lives. Come women by the thousands, your rage will take the streets. I have dreamed, I have dreamed. Tree eaters, wife beaters, radiation leakers, toxic spillers, horror thrillers, goddess killers, diet sellers, forest fellers, torture teachers, black robe preachers, woman buyers, terrorizers, earth takers, child rapers, porn makers, woman haters. Your day is done, your time has come. What goes around comes around. 3 times over, the witches say. 3 times over. Women, lift your chants and your fists to the sky for your freedom, for your sisters, for your planet, for your lives. Come women by the thousands, your rage will take the streets. I have dreamed.